Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the absolute center of a bustling metropolis during the height of rush hour. Yellow taxis are honking, frantic crowds are pushing past you, and 100 different digital demands are pulling at your attention. Now, imagine that despite this sensory bombardment, you feel a profound, unshakable sense of stillness radiating from within. This isn't just a meditative daydream. It is the core promise of Paramhansa Yogananda's profound teachings on detachment. When Yogananda first stepped off the ship in Boston in 1920, he brought a perspective that was utterly revolutionary to the Western world. In a culture that was rapidly becoming defined by industrial expansion, material acquisition, and the pursuit of outward success, he introduced the ancient yogic concept of vairagya. But here is the crucial distinction that many miss. Yogananda taught that detachment is not about giving up the world, but about giving up the sense of possession that causes us so much internal friction and suffering. To the uninitiated, the word detachment sounds cold, perhaps even heartless, like a gray indifference toward the people we love. However, the great master described it as the highest form of love and the only path to true freedom. He explained that our suffering isn't caused by the things we have, but by the invisible threads of I and mine that we wrap around them. When we believe we own something, we become slaves to the fear of its loss. By letting go of the ego's grip, we actually become more present, more loving, and more capable of enjoying life's gifts without the shadow of anxiety. We transition from being owners to being divine trustees of our own lives. Imagine stepping off a boat into 1920s America. The Great War was over and the Roaring Twenties were just beginning to hit their stride. It was an era defined by the first real explosion of mass consumerism, where the American dream was starting to look less like basic survival and more like the frantic accumulation of things: automobiles, radios, and high society status. Into this whirlwind of burgeoning materialism stepped Paramhansa Yogananda. He looked at the skyscraper-lined horizons and didn't see a land of ultimate plenty. He saw a land of attachment slavery. To address this, Yogananda introduced the ancient Sanskrit concept of vairagya. Now, this is a word that often gets a bad rap because it's frequently mistranslated as mere indifference or coldness. But vairagya actually represents a profound psychological state of dispassion or non-attachment. Yogananda taught that most people exist in a state of constant emotional flux because their internal joy is shackled to external variables. You could almost think of it as a mathematical equation for suffering. Your happiness is the variable, and it's entirely dependent on 1,000 other factors you can't control. He coined the term attachment slavery to describe this condition. If you need a specific person's approval or a certain level of bank balance to feel okay, you aren't really free. Those objects own you. You become a hostage to the inevitable tides of change. Yogananda observed that when we build our identity on these shifting sands, we are setting ourselves up for a crash when the economic or personal waves roll in. Vairagya, then, wasn't about abandoning the world. It was about shifting your foundation to something that doesn't shake. It's the art of being in the world, but not of it. Yogananda often illustrated the paradox of detachment through a story that cuts right to the heart of our common misconceptions. He spoke of a powerful king who sat upon a magnificent golden throne, surrounded by the finest silks and rarest jewels. To any outside observer, this king was the very definition of material entanglement. Yet, Yogananda explained that this king remained internally free. He understood deeply that his position, his palace, and his power were merely borrowed from the divine. Had his kingdom vanished in a single afternoon, he was mentally prepared to walk away into the forest at a moment's notice, his inner peace completely undisturbed. Now, contrast this with a beggar Yogananda described, a man who possessed absolutely nothing in this world except for a single dented tin bowl. This bowl was his only tool for survival. However, this beggar was so intensely attached to that one object that he lived in a constant state of paralyzing fear. He obsessed over the possibility of it being stolen. He gripped it with a psychological ferocity that defined his entire identity. This highlights the most critical realization in Yogananda's philosophy. Detachment is not a physical condition. It is a state of mind. He essentially proposed a spiritual formula where suffering is not determined by the quantity of possessions, but by the intensity of the ego's grip on them. It is the internal identification, not the external object, that binds us. We often make the mistake of thinking that by getting rid of things, we automatically become spiritual. But if you give away your house and still obsess over your reputation, you are still bound. Yogananda taught that true freedom is the ability to use the world without being owned by it. It is the difference between holding a bird in an open palm versus clutching it in a closed fist. The palm remains open, and the soul remains free. Central to everything Paramhansa Yogananda taught was a sharp, crucial distinction that often confuses spiritual seekers: the difference between renunciation and detachment. Now, it's true that Yogananda established a monastic order, but he spent the vast majority of his time teaching householders, people with jobs, mortgages, and families, that they could achieve the exact same spiritual heights as a yogi living in a remote Himalayan cave. Yogananda's argument was that inner renunciation is far more potent than outer renunciation. He often quipped that running away to a forest or a cave does very little good if your mind is still ruminating on a sensory pleasure or a personal grievance. If you take your desires with you, the cave simply becomes a prison of your own thoughts. True renunciation isn't about giving up the world, it's about giving up the thought of the world as yours. He taught that it's not what you possess, but how you relate to it. A king sitting on a golden throne who is mentally detached from his wealth is a greater yogi than a beggar who is obsessed with the coin he doesn't have. This was revolutionary for the 20th century West. He was telling businessmen and mothers that the battlefield of life is the ultimate training ground. By performing your duties without being emotionally enslaved by the results, you cultivate a mental fortress. He used to say that the world is God's motion picture. To be detached is to realize you are the spectator, not the character on the screen who is suffering. Whether you wear the orange robes of a monk or a business suit, the goal remains the same: a mind so anchored in the divine that no external circumstance can shake your inner peace. To truly grasp detachment, we have to look under the hood of human consciousness. Paramhansa Yogananda often pointed to the primary culprit, the ego, or what yoga philosophy calls ahamkara. Think of ahamkara not just as simple pride, but as the I maker, the specific faculty of the mind that creates the illusion of a separate identity. It is the core mechanism that says, "This is mine, I am this body," or "I must have this specific result to be happy." Yogananda explained that the ego operates through a powerful binary system known as raga dvesha. Raga is the magnetic attachment to things we like, while dvesha is the deep-seated aversion or repulsion toward things we dislike. These aren't just casual preferences. They are energetic hooks that bind our happiness to external conditions. When we are caught in this web of raga dvesha, we lose our inner center. We become, as Yogananda colorfully described, psychological puppets. Imagine being a marionette. Every time someone criticizes your work, a string is pulled and you slump into dejection. Every time you receive praise, another string pulls you into a temporary, fragile high. You aren't actually in control. The environment is pulling the strings. Yogananda's teaching on the mechanics of detachment is about cutting those strings. By neutralizing raga and dvesha through meditation and self-observation, we transition from being reactive puppets to beings of soul-centered volition. Volition here means true, independent will, not a will driven by compulsive cravings or paralyzing fears, but a clear choice originating from the soul. Instead of being pushed by the winds of circumstance, you act from a place of unshakable stillness. You can still enjoy life, but your joy is no longer a hostage to fortune. You become the master of your internal state. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of Yogananda's teaching, the one that really trips people up, is detachment and our closest relationships. When we hear the word detachment, we usually picture a cold, distant emotional wall. But Yogananda was adamant. Detachment does not mean loving less, it actually means loving more purely. Think about how we typically love. Yogananda described ordinary human love as being hooked. It's full of invisible strings, expectations, conditions, and the ego's constant internal negotiation of what's in it for me. We often love someone because of how they make us feel or how they validate us, but that kind of love is fragile. It's built on a foundation of fear, the devastating fear of losing the person, or the suffocating need to control their behavior to ensure our own emotional security. Yogananda taught that true detachment is the antidote to this anxiety. By practicing it, you learn to see your partner, your child, or your friend not as a possession, but as a unique expression of the divine. You start to love the soul, not just the personality or the service they provide you. When you stop trying to own another person, the hooks disappear. You aren't constantly checking their actions against a rigid list of demands. This shift creates a much deeper, more expansive form of affection. It's a liberating love that says, I love you for who you are in spirit, and I want your highest good. Paradoxically, by letting go of the grip of attachment, you become capable of a warmth and a constancy that human emotion alone can never reach. You move from a love that shrinks the heart to a love that encompasses the world. Think about how many times you've tried to force yourself to let go of a habit, a craving, or a lingering attachment. Usually, it feels like an uphill battle of sheer willpower. Paramhansa Yogananda understood this struggle deeply. He pointed out that trying to achieve detachment by force is like trying to push a river upstream. The reason it's so difficult is because of prana, or our life force. By default, this energy is constantly surging outward through our five senses, pulling our attention into the material world. It's a biological and energetic habit that makes the external world seem like the only source of reality and fulfillment. Yogananda offered a revolutionary, practical tool to flip this dynamic, the science of Kriya Yoga. Instead of fighting the senses with the mind alone, Kriya works directly with the subtle energy behind them. It's a physiological and spiritual technique that teaches the practitioner to consciously withdraw that outward-bound life force and direct it inward, toward the spine and the brain. In Yogananda's terms, this process recharges the body battery with divine energy. As the energy flows back to the center, the astral spine, the practitioner begins to experience a profound internal sense of peace, often described as an ever-new joy. This is the secret sauce of Yogananda's teaching on detachment. When the joy you feel inside during meditation becomes more tangible and vibrant than the fleeting pleasures of the outside world, detachment isn't something you struggle to perform. It's something that happens naturally and without effort. You don't have to force yourself to let go of the lesser when you finally grasp the greater. It's a natural transition of values. Suddenly, the shiny objects and emotional dramas that used to consume your energy simply lose their grip because you found a superior alternative within. You are no longer rejecting the world. You are simply anchored in a much deeper reality. Think back to the last time you were completely absorbed in a movie. Maybe you were gripping the armrests during a thriller, or wiping away a stray tear during a heartbreaking finale. In those moments, your physiology actually changes. Your heart rate spikes and your brain reacts as if the danger or the loss is happening to you. Paramhansa Yogananda used this exact experience as his most profound metaphor for human existence, the cosmic motion picture. He taught that this entire world, everything we touch, taste, and fear, is essentially a series of light and shadow projected on the screen of human consciousness. In a theater, if the hero dies, you might feel the weight of the scene, but you don't rush to the stage to perform CPR. Why? Because you know it is just light passing through a film strip. You are detached from the physical reality of the tragedy while still being fully engaged in the story. Yogananda suggested that the yogi views life through this same lens, recognizing it as a dream drama. When we lack detachment, we are like an audience member who has forgotten they are in a theater. We think the flickering shadows are the only reality. We become shattered by the plot twists, the sudden losses, the illnesses, or the unexpected failures. But here is the crucial distinction. Recognizing life as a movie doesn't make it meaningless. It actually frees you to participate more fully. Imagine an actor who knows they are in a play. They can play the hero or the victim with total intensity because they know once the curtain falls, they are safe. That is the essence of Yogananda's detachment. It is the ability to play your part in the drama of life with all your heart, while remaining anchored in the knowledge that you are the immortal observer, not the shadow on the screen. Now we arrive at a cornerstone of Yogananda's practical philosophy, the concept of nishkama karma, or duty without attachment. This wasn't just abstract theology for him, it was a survival kit for the modern soul. Drawing directly from the Bhagavad Gita, Yogananda taught that our liberation doesn't come from running away to a cave, but from how we show up in our daily roles. Think about your life for a moment. Whether you're a parent, a corporate employee, or a citizen, you have responsibilities. Most of us approach these duties with a transactional mindset. We think, I'll work hard so I can get that promotion, or I'll be a great parent so my child will succeed and make me proud. Yogananda pointed out that this attachment to the fruits of our labor, the specific results, is actually the primary source of human misery. He urged us to perform every action with total 100% dedication, but to remain internally indifferent to the outcome. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? How can you be dedicated if you don't care about the result? The secret, he said, lies in the motivation. When you shift your focus from ego gratification to serving the divine, the work itself becomes an act of worship. You're no longer the doer trying to manipulate the world. You're an instrument of a higher power. This shift is the ultimate antidote to burnout. Stress doesn't come from hard work. It comes from the anxiety of whether that work will be rewarded. By relinquishing the fruits, you become psychologically immune to the highs of success and the lows of failure. You work with a calm, focused intensity, fueled by purpose rather than pressure. In Yogananda's view, nishkama karma is the path to being truly in this world, but not of it. For Paramhansa Yogananda, detachment wasn't a cold withdrawal from the world or a lack of love. Rather, it was the only true shield we have against the inevitable arrows of suffering and the paralyzing fear of death. Think about it. Why do we fear the end so intensely? It's because of our profound, singular identification with this physical frame. Yogananda argued that this is the ultimate attachment. We spend an entire lifetime saying, my body, my house, my family, creating these invisible, ironclad bonds of minus. But when we treat these temporary assignments as permanent identities, we set ourselves up for agony when they inevitably shift or fade. He taught that the soul is fundamentally immortal, a spark of the divine that cannot be touched by fire, water, or time. To find peace, he suggested we must systematically and consciously loosen these bonds. It's a gradual process of unlearning. Instead of seeing death as a terrifying abyss or a final curtain call, Yogananda invited us to view it as the shedding of a temporary garment. Imagine you're taking off an old, worn-out coat at the end of a long, productive day. The coat isn't you. It was just something you wore for a season to navigate a specific environment. By practicing this mental shift while we are still healthy and active, we transform our relationship with the world. We begin to see the transition of death not as a loss of self, but as a liberation, a journey toward an infinite expansion where the small ego finally dissolves into the vast ocean of spirit. In this light, detachment becomes an act of supreme courage and wisdom. It is the preparation for a final transition that is actually a homecoming. We are not humans having a spiritual experience. We are immortal souls navigating a temporary material dream. Paramhansa Yogananda often spoke about a hallmark of the spiritually advanced soul, a quality he called even-mindedness. It's a term that sounds peaceful, perhaps even passive, until you hear how he challenged his students to apply it. He famously exhorted them to remain calm and unshaken, even in the crash of breaking worlds. Now, think about that imagery for a second. He wasn't talking about a minor inconvenience, like a flat tire or a rainy day. He was describing the ultimate upheaval, the total collapse of your external circumstances. In Yogananda's teaching, this mental equilibrium isn't a sign of coldness or a lack of feeling. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It is a sign of immense spiritual strength. Most people confuse detachment with apathy, but Yogananda clarified that true detachment is the ability to remain centered in your own inner peace, regardless of whether the world is giving you a standing ovation or falling apart at the seams. Why is this so critical? Because of how we function under pressure. When we are deeply attached to specific outcomes, A crisis triggers a massive emotional reaction that effectively paralyzes our higher reasoning. We panic, we lash out, or we freeze. But the even-minded person, through the practice of detachment, maintains a clear psychological space. This space allows them to think logically and, more importantly, to act compassionately. While others are swept away by the tide of their own fear, the even-minded individual stands as a lighthouse. They can see the needs of others and respond with wisdom because they aren't drowning in their own egoic identification with the disaster. It is the difference between being a victim of circumstance and being a master of self.
Paramhansa Yogananda didn't just treat detachment as an abstract philosophy. He provided a very specific, practical technology to achieve it. He called it the practice of self-observation, or what is traditionally known in yoga as witness consciousness. Imagine you're caught in a sudden, violent storm of anger, or sharp, agonizing pull of greed or longing. Usually, we identify so closely with these feelings that we effectively become the emotion. We say, "I am angry," and in that moment, the ego and the emotion are one. But Yogananda suggested a radical shift in perspective. He instructed his students to step back mentally and observe the emotion as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Think of it like watching a movie. When the character on screen is terrified, you might feel the tension, but you aren't actually in danger. You are the observer in the theater seat. By adopting this witness stance, you create a vital psychological buffer. In every human interaction, there is a stimulus, perhaps a harsh word from a colleague, and then there is the response. Usually, these two are fused together in a knee-jerk reaction. However, self-observation pries them apart. It creates a space. In that tiny, newfound gap between what happens to you and how you react, detachment truly resides. Yogananda taught that when you identify with a feeling, you tether your infinite soul to a passing mental cloud. But if you observe the cloud passing without becoming it, you reclaim your soul's freedom. You aren't suppressing the emotion, you are simply refusing to be possessed by it. This is the exact point where the soul's autonomy is won back, allowing you to choose calm over chaos. Yogananda often spoke about a fascinating paradox, that the bravest people on earth are actually the most detached. It sounds counterintuitive at first glance. We usually think of detachment as being passive or perhaps even cold, but he argued it is the very foundation of lion-like courage. He broke this down into a simple, almost mathematical psychological principle. All fear, without exception, is rooted in the attachment to something that can be lost. Think about that for a moment. If you are heavily attached to your reputation, you live in constant fear of criticism. If you are attached to your bank account, you live in fear of a market crash. If you are solely attached to the physical body, you live in the ultimate fear of death. Yogananda's solution wasn't to stop loving life, but to shift our identification. He taught that by realizing our true nature is the indestructible spirit, the Atman, we lose the capacity for fear because the spirit cannot be touched by fire, water, or time. Yogananda himself lived this principle during the various trials of his American mission. In the mid-1920s, he was a sensation, filling the largest auditoriums in the country, from Carnegie Hall to the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Yet his equanimity was just as present when the cameras were off, and he faced periods of stinging betrayal by close associates or crushing financial hardships that threatened the very existence of his organization. Whether he was being celebrated by thousands or facing the threat of losing everything he had built, he maintained a cheerful, surrendered attitude. He proved that true courage isn't the absence of trouble, but the presence of an inner security that remains unshaken by the world's changing weather.
Now, let's look at how we actually bring these lofty ideals of detachment down to earth. For the modern individual, someone navigating gridlock traffic, demanding bosses, and endless digital notifications, Yogananda's path is incredibly practical. He didn't expect anyone to achieve perfect equanimity overnight. Instead, he recommended starting with the small things. Think about the last time a bus was late or someone made a cutting, rude comment to you. Usually, our reaction is automatic, immediate frustration, anger, or a bruised ego. Yogananda taught that these moments are actually vital training grounds. By consciously choosing not to be bothered, by simply observing the irritation and letting it pass without reacting, we engage in a form of spiritual resistance.
He called these small victories, and he insisted they are essential because they build what he termed spiritual muscle. Just like physical resistance training, every time you refuse to be pulled off center by a minor inconvenience, your internal core strength increases. Eventually, that muscle becomes strong enough to carry you through the truly devastating challenges of life. But Yogananda's strategy wasn't just internal. It was also about how we structure our daily existence. He advocated for simplicity in living. He used a powerful metaphor regarding surface area. Think about it this way. The more external needs, luxuries, and complex desires we cultivate, the more surface area we provide for the hooks of attachment to grab onto. If you require 100 specific conditions to be happy, you have 100 points of potential suffering. By simplifying, by learning to need less, you effectively shrink the target. You become less hookable. In his view, simplicity isn't about deprivation, it's about strategic freedom, ensuring your peace isn't held hostage by the world.
So, where does this all lead? In Paramhansa Yogananda's teachings, detachment isn't an end in itself. It's the essential preparation for the ultimate state of human existence, samadhi. Yogananda describes samadhi as the final, ecstatic oneness, where the individual soul dissolves into the vast ocean of spirit. To explain why we don't feel this oneness now, he used a beautiful metaphor, the mirror of consciousness. Imagine your mind is a mirror designed to reflect the light of God. However, through lifetimes of habit, we've allowed that mirror to become caked with thick layers of dust. This dust is composed of restless desires, vasanas or latent tendencies, and fierce attachments to the I, me, and mine. When we look into a dusty mirror, we don't see pure light, we see a blurred, distorted image. We mistake that smudge for our true identity. We think we are the physical body or the ego because that's the only reflection getting through the grime. Detachment is the process of wiping that mirror clean. Every time you choose to remain even-minded in the face of loss or release a compulsive craving through meditation, you are buffing away a layer of that dust. Yogananda taught that as the mirror becomes clearer, the reflection becomes sharper and more luminous. You begin to realize that the distortion of the ego was never the truth of your being. When the speck of desire is removed, the mirror is perfectly clear. In that stillness, you no longer see a self separate from the universe. Instead, you see the divine reflecting perfectly within your own heart. This is the truth about detachment. It removes the obstacles so you can finally see who you are.
As we reflect on the profound legacy of Paramhansa Yogananda, his teachings on detachment emerge not as an archaic ascetic practice, but as a vital roadmap for navigating the complexities of the 21st century. He fundamentally reframed our understanding of this spiritual pillar, proving that detachment is never a path of negation or a cold turning away from the world. Instead, it is the path of supreme affirmation. Think of it as a divine equation of the soul. We often live in a state of constant clinging, trying to hold on to shifting sands, temporary wealth, fleeting status, or the volatile validation of others. Yogananda taught that when we tighten our grip on these small, finite things, we paradoxically limit our capacity to experience the infinite. He invited us to realize that to truly possess everything, one must first possess nothing. By letting go of the ego's frantic need for control, we finally open our hands to receive the unchanging, ever-new joy of the spirit. In our current age, dominated by digital noise and relentless material pursuit, his legacy offers a necessary anchor. He taught that detachment isn't about loving less, it's about loving more purely. It's the shift from a love that is conditional and possessive to a love that is expansive and free. His simple, revolutionary truth remains. We lose nothing of real value when we practice detachment. We only shed the heavy illusions that block our view of the divine. What remains is everything that is real, everything that is lasting, and everything that truly satisfies the heart. Yogananda showed us that the soul is not a hermit, but a master of the universe who enjoys life fully because he depends on it for nothing. This is the ultimate freedom, the gift of the infinite, and the truth that continues to light our way today.